Hello YouTube, welcome back to the Card Combo Show, episode 55 with me, Chocobilly, where I look at the weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week I'm going to be looking at cards that put you in their place. Put you in their place? Put you in your place. Basically cards that put things in places, so put from the field into the break zone, put onto your deck, that sort of thing. So the cards I'm looking at this week are Typhon, Lord of Crags from Opus 14, Larsa from Opus 14, Typhon from Opus 14, the Emperor from Opus 12, and finally Seymour from Opus 7. Alright, first and foremost, we've got a big boy here, Typhon, Lord of Crags. 7 CP, 9k Earth forward. When Typhon, Lord of Crags enters the field, break all the forwards with power less than Typhon, Lord of Crags. When 5 or more forwards are put from the field into the break zone by this effect, Typhon, Lord of Crags deals your opponent 1 point of damage. Good thing about this, although some might contest this, is the fact that he breaks your own forwards as well. So if your opponent's got 3 and you've got 2 and those 5 break, you deal your opponent a point of damage. Pretty saucy. Right, so something like Jake's pretty decent because when Typhon, Lord of Crags enters the field, you can stack it so that Typhon stacks first, and then Jake stacks afterwards. Jake will then buff Typhon, and then when Typhon comes to resolve, he will be a 13k forward, which means that pretty much every forward on the field will be less than him, so, you know, they're going to break. Obviously not great against your own forwards, but if your opponent's got a lot of big forwards that you need to get rid of, this is a good way around it. Right, next we've got Paravir. So when Paravir enters the field, all the forwards you control cannot be broken this turn. Obviously that means you can play Paravir and then Typhon. That is a total of 10 CP, not including the 2 cards from hand. But you get to break all your opponent's forwards whilst keeping yours. So if you've got 3 forwards there that are ready to attack and Paravir saves them, it's probably worth it. Gusco. So when Gusco enters the field or attacks, remove the top card of your deck from the game. And when he leaves the field, add all the cards removed by his ability to your hand. So maybe Gusco's been on the field for a few turns, he's got a few cards removed from game, you play Typhon, Gusco dies and gets you some cards to hand, which kind of recurs the cost of playing Typhon in the first place. And Vikings, similar sort of thing. Obviously when he leaves the field you get a card to hand, but you know, Vikings have a fantastic engine of searching each other or using something like Layla to bring in a Viking which reveals top 5, which could bring in another Viking. So it's a good way to be able to get lots of very small forwards onto the field, which will probably get you lots of cards to hand, but also works towards Typhon breaking them to then also dealing your opponent a point of damage, not to mention the fact you get to draw cards. Then you got Ultros. So when Ultros is put from the field into the break zone, you may pay 1 water. When you do so, search one card named Ultros and add it to your hand. So again, similar sort of thing, you get to add cards to hand. You do have to pay the 1 water mine, so it does mean effectively Typhon becomes 8 CP, but then you get the card back to hand, so he's a 6 CP. But ultimately, using Ultros to dull and put him into the break zone to choose 1 forward, it loses 5,000 power. So if your opponent does have a huge forward, or you can anticipate your opponent using something to buff a forward, you can use Ultros to minus 5k and still pay the 1 water if you want to get another card to hand, and then play Typhon to break that very large forward. Anima. So when a forward opponent controls put from the field into the break zone, choose 1 forward opponent controls, dull it. So even though Anima himself would would be put from the field into the break zone from Typhon's effect, provided he isn't buffed, Anima, when put into the break zone, will also see your opponent's forwards put into the break zone and get to dull out anything that does remain on the field. So maybe your opponent's got a couple of large forwards that won't die to Typhon, but then they've also got a couple of forwards that do die. It then means that those 2 forwards become dull as well. Regis. So when he enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards other than card name Regis, light or dark, put from the field into the break zone, and during this turn, play them onto the field. So an excellent way just to be able to, you know, Typhon, break a few forwards, hopefully break a few of your opponent's forwards. You can then, you know, break back up Noctis if you want to then play Regis onto the field to then bring in more things. Obviously, you can actually already have Regis on the field because he is only an 8k. You play Typhon, Regis gets put into the break zone. Break Noctis, bring Regis back in to bring a couple more forwards that were broken by Typhon. And, you know, if they got haste, something like Iliwa, give them all haste, go swinging. Variold. When Variold put from the field into the break zone, choose 1 wind monster, so I can't speak, of cost 4 or less in your break zone and play it onto the field. A lot of good wind monsters in the game now, but especially something like Death Gaze. So obviously your opponent might again have a forward that doesn't get broken from Typhon, so Variold getting broken and then bringing Death Gaze would then get rid of that very annoying forward. Alright, next we have Larsa, a very unique card. So, 2 CP, 5k, water forward, EX burst. When Larsa enters the field, choose one card in your damage zone, add it to your hand. Put one card from your hand into the damage zone. Its EX burst effect will not trigger. And words. The forwards you control gain plus 2000 power for every 3 cards with EX burst in your damage zone. So, something of note is that when you do put, or take something out of the break zone and then put another forward, or put another card, sorry, into your damage zone, that does not count as receiving a point of damage. It is in the FAQ on the website as well, but if you haven't seen that, it doesn't count. So you're not going to be able to trigger some funny abilities to be able to then take a point of damage. But yes, a very unique card, only the second card in the game to actually touch or even affect your damage zone. The other one, of course, being Axstar. But something like Seymour's really good for this. So you can use Seymour to put a summon on top of your deck, and then, you take that as an EX burst, goes to the damage, and then you can play Larsa to then get that card to hand. It's an excellent way to be able to just find something important. It doesn't even have to be an EX burst. Maybe play Seymour to just, I don't know, something like Ultima, put it on top of your deck, your opponent hits you, it goes to damage. Oh no, you play Larsa, gets it to hand, and then you can, if you want to cast Ultima, or to have it in hand ready to cast when you need to. Ultimately, using Seymour and Larsa to get you a very important summon to hand can be useful. Sin. Now this is a bit of a weird one, but I like the concept of having, say, Sin goes into damage. Knowing that Sin is there is useful because that Sin, your opponent cannot affect your damage aside from, dealing you damage. They can't shift things around in a damage yet anyway. So knowing that Sin is there and playing Larsa will get you that Sin to hand, it means that you can work on playing a Sin onto the field and being able to use Giga Graviton when you need to, so, having all that protection ready for Sin's S ability, making sure you've got all the costs worked out, and then you play Larsa to then get Sin to your hand from the break zone. You then use that for the S ability to then Giga Graviton, and your opponent then has to deal with Sin fairly quickly. If you've managed to prepare for it, then you should be gravy. Again, also playing Larsa onto the field is a good way just to get a dark card out of your hand, or light or dark card out of your hand, because if you're unable to play it and you can't discard it for whatever reason, just put it in your break zone. That was good. Phoenix. So yeah, again, being able to cast Phoenix to bring Larsa onto the field, that makes him a 7k blocker anyway, but then be able to shift a EX out of your, or shift a card out of your damage zone into your hand to then be able to cast that as well, could well surprise your opponent, especially if you're on a mono element, just with the Larsa, well, I say mono element, mono fire, just with the Larsa thrown in, just for the Phoenix play. Drace. I love playing this Drace with the Larsa backup, but if you control a card named Larsa, the cost to play Drace into the field is reduced by 2. Obviously it can't become 0, and if you control a card named Larsa, Drace gains plus 2000 power and first strike. He's a 1 CP AK first striker, that's fine. And Waltrel. When Waltrel enters the field, he plays 2 cards. Well, basically using his effect. I'm not going to read it all out because it's quite lengthy. You can put cards back into your deck. So actually, let's say you had something go from your go into your damage, which is an EX burst, and you want it back in your deck. You play Larsa, get it back into your hand. You then play Waltrel or use Waltrel's ability to put that card back into your deck. So now you're actually able to cycle cards straight from your damage back into your deck, ready for another EX burst proc potentially, or searching and playing. There's lots of different cool combos you can do with this. But being able to, with Larsa, you are now able to move things from anywhere in the game, minus remove from game, to anywhere else, which is hilarious. And Leviathan, similar sort of thing as well, so you could take an EX burst and then play Larsa onto the field, cast Leviathan to put that EX burst back on top of your deck, take another point of damage. You've just taken the same EX burst twice. Okay, the Emperor. So 2 CP 5k ice forward. When the Emperor enters the field, if you have 2 or more card name of the Emperor in your break zone, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. When the Emperor is put from the field into the break zone, you may search for 1 card named the Emperor and put it into the break zone. If you do so, play the Emperor from your break zone onto the field dial at the end of your turn. That's a bit of a mouthful. He's interesting. There's a lot of Emperor cards out there, and a few of them work nicely with being able to recur themselves and bring them onto the field, but ultimately I think this one is just a bit more effective because he's making your opponent discard, and he is recurring, or he's coming back onto the field at the end of the turn as well. Hilarious note here is that if he dies in an end of turn process, so let's say at the end of your opponent's turn when you control Death Machine, Emperor will go into the break zone, and then he will come back onto the field, provided he can, but he'll come in at the end of the next turn, so at the end of your turn, which is kind of strange, but funny. Anyway. The Mega Sisters, so being able to play the Mega Sisters to search an Emperor to put it into break zone, so that means when this Emperor comes into the field, you make sure that your opponent is discarding a card. Waltrel, again, being able to take that that Emperor that is in your break zone and put it back into your deck, because you only need 2 Emperors in the break zone to be able to trigger the Emperor making your opponent discard, but, you know, using this Emperor, you're also going to be putting Emperors from your deck into the break zone, so you want to make sure, you know, if you're starting to get a lot of your Emperors into the break zone, put them back in your deck, and keep on going. Barrel Eye. So when your opponent discards 1 or more cards from their hand due to your summon's abilities, choose one character to land freezer. So the Emperor comes in at the end of your turn, or their turn, whenever he comes in at the end of the turn, and then not only do you get to make your opponent discard, but you also get to dull and freeze something with Barrel Eye. Gremlin. So your opponent discards, Gremlin becomes a forward. That's pretty decent. And then also when Gremlin is put from the field into the break zone, choose a forward. You also get to dull and freeze as well. So Gremlin's a nice little forward, I think. He's quite offensive and hard, or not hard for your opponent to get around, but awkward because you're going to be dulling freezing something up when he dies as well. An Emperor hopefully will be triggering quite frequently to make your opponent discard. Chivalry, so this is a bit of a weird one, but let's say you can use Emperor, make him an 8k with Chivalry, and Emperor trades with something. That's only really works if you're trading, but you know, if Emperor is ultimately killing something small on him as well, your opponent is still going to be discarding with it. But if it is a straight 8k trade and Emperor goes into the break zone and so does the forward, your opponent will then discard a card, and then when Emperor re-enters the field, make him discard again. And Fanfrit, yeah, pretty simple. Just put Fanfrit into the break zone, or you cast Fanfrit, put Emperor into the break zone, re-enters the field, make your opponent discard, and obviously your opponent had to put forward into the break zone as well. Kefka, again, forcing the Emperor to be broken, but this is a nice way to make the Emperor a large forward, and then even if your opponent doesn't break him, the Emperor will break at the end of the turn, and now this is what I was talking about earlier, so it will break in a end of turn process, which means that he will then re-enter at the end of the next turn. But let's say you use Kefka on your turn, he will enter at the end of your opponent's turn, which means obviously he enters the field dull, your opponent will have to discard a card, which is kind of hilarious. It works nicely with Scale Toad, but then in your turn, because he's re-entered at the end of your opponent's turn, he will then activate and be ready to attack because he's been on the field a turn. And finally, Seymour. So obviously we talked about him earlier, but he has a 2 CP lightning backup. EX Burst. When Seymour enters the field, search for 1 summon and put it on top of your deck. And Lance of Atrophy, if you've ever played Final Fantasy X, I hate that ability. S and 2 lightning, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a summon, you may cast it without paying the cost. So the fact you can put any summon on top of your deck is really, really powerful. Obviously I mentioned that earlier, using him with Larsa, be able to put that forward, that summon into the break zone if it's an EX Burst, and it probably will be, then that will do its effect, but then using Larsa to get back to hand is really good as well. But yeah, just if you're able to do something, say like Rydia, so you play Seymour onto the field, you put a really big summon on top of your deck, say something like Raiden, and then you play Rydia. When Rydia enters the field, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal 1 summon other than Light or Dark among them, and cast it without paying the cost. So, I mean, yes, you've paid 7 for Rydia and Seymour, but if you're playing something like Raiden off the top of your deck for free, that's probably worth it. And obviously Rydia's tiny as well, so she isn't exactly large, and Rydia and Seymour are cards out of hand, but still, I think it's definitely a fantastic combo, and you know, Raiden is just the first summon that comes to mind because it's such a large summon, but actually there are probably better summons out there to combo it with. But yeah, use Seymour to put basically any summon on top of your deck and then play Rydia to cast it. Setzer. So obviously when you play someone onto the field, you get to put the summon on top of your deck, so you know what the cost of that summon is. So you can use Setzer's S ability, reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card CP cost is an odd number, break all the dull forwards opponent controls. If the revealed card CP is an even number, activate all the characters other than Setzer you control and draw 2 cards. So yeah, obviously you'll get to reveal it, and then if it is a even number, even number, you get to draw that card, and then another card as well, which if it is a good summon, you can then play. But ultimately you can, you know, dull or break a lot of dull things if you need to, or just be able to force play, basically hedging your bets that Setzer's slots are going to win. Vanille. I think I've talked about this combo before, but yeah, when Vanille enters the field, choose 1 dull forward, select 1 number and reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card is of the same cost, select number, break it. So similar to slots, just reveal the card. Oh look, it's the same number. You get to break something. Schrodinger. So he's got a lot of text there, but basically If Schrödinger reveals top card, if it is a summon, draw 2 cards. So again, similar to Setzer's slots, if it's an even number, you play Schrödinger onto the field, you reveal the top card, oh look, it's a summon because Seymour put it there, you get to draw that card and then another card as well. And Ephemeral Summoner, because if you think you're going to take 2 points of damage, why not put 2 X-Bursts on top of your deck? So Ephemeral Summoner enters the field, you may search for 1 water summon of cost 4 or less and put it on top of your deck, which works nicely with the new Leviathan. And then obviously Seymour as well can put any summon on top of your deck. So, you know, maybe you've got Leviathan on the field, you play Ephemeral Summoner, and he's going to put 2 Leviathans on top of your deck. That's hilarious, because if you take those 2 as EX Burst, Leviathan's going to trigger and you're going to get to a lot of things happening. If not, those 2 Leviathans come to hand and you still get to cast them, and lots of fun things happen. Ultimately, you get to put 2 summons on top of your deck, and they either come to hand or they go to damage. You get lots of effects for free. Right, Typhon. Typhon, what a fantastic card. Oh my god, I love this card. I think everyone's in unison that this is just a great card, which I guess makes up for its horrible monster design. That is just atrocious to look at, but good card nonetheless. So if you control 3 or more wind backups, Typhon also becomes a forward with 8,000 power. When Typhon enters the field, choose 1 forward. Put it under the top 4 card of its owner's deck. So quite unique in its effect as well, and fairly easy to get it to become a forward as well. Paul. Oh, I love this card. So let's say your opponent's got a 2 CP forward and Paul's there, not able to attack. You play Typhon. You put that 2 CP forward under the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck. You attack with Paul. They take a point of damage and then they mill 5 cards, which includes that card that you just put under their deck. So that's pretty hilarious. It gets rid of the forward that was there, and obviously it doesn't have to be the 2 CP forward. It can just be a really problematic forward because Typhon doesn't have any restrictions on that. So let's say, you know, something horrible is just sat there and there's nothing you can do about it. Play Typhon, put it under there, Paul swings, and that card is now in the break zone. Fantastic. Bismarck. So yeah, at the end of your turn, you can bounce something back to your hand. So just keep on bouncing Typhon back to your hand, keep on playing him onto the field the next turn to then keep on putting your opponents forwards under their deck. So they just keep on losing forwards. Thief. Oh, I love this card. So similar to the Paul play that I mentioned earlier, you can count when your opponent's forward is going to be coming up. So obviously you play Typhon onto the field, that forward will be the 5th card in their deck, so you pass turn, they draw 2 cards, that card is then the 3rd card under their next turn, provided they haven't drawn any cards. It will then be the top card of your deck. You can then use something like Thief to put the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck into the break zone, which means that you then know that that forward that you put there is going to be going to the break zone. Obviously, if you've dealt them pointed damage or if they've drawn, you have to account for that, but still a good way to get that forward into the break zone, similar to Paul. And then this Thief, put Thief into the break zone, your opponent reveals his or her hand, select 1 character card from their hand, your opponent discards this card, you can only use the ability during your turn, but you should know when that forward is in your opponent's hand, because again, you can count for it. Obviously you want to make sure they haven't discarded it for something else, but if you know it's there and they haven't played it onto the field on your turn, use this Thief to be able to just swipe it from the hand, put it into the break zone. Very Old, again, obviously I omitted Typhon earlier, but Very Old works excellently with Typhon as well. So just sacking off Very Old to bring out Typhon from your break zone to then bounce your opponents forward. Pretty good. Shinryu! So when Shinryu enters the field, deal 10,000 damage to all the forwards of cost 3, 6, and 9 opponent controls at the beginning of main phase 1. During each of your turns, reveal the top card of your opponent's deck. If it's a forward, all the forwards your opponent controls lose 7,000 power. So obviously I mentioned before that you can count for when the forward is going to be at the top of their deck or when it's not. But ultimately, knowing that it's going to be there, play Shinryu. Oh look, it's that forward. You get to minus 7k your opponent's board. Pretty decent. And there we go, folks. That is episode 55 done and dusted. I have to apologise because there's been a bit of radio silence. There's just so much going on at the moment. But I'm trying to catch up, and there should be some more videos on the horizon. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a wait, unfortunately. But I'm going to try and keep these card combo shows as weekly as possible. At the very least, and then my Let's Plays and some deck techs, and I want to do more behind the cards. The next one will be Final Fantasy 4, which I'm looking forward to doing because there's a lot of party characters in that game and some great resemblances of the abilities and the stories they represent as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video.